All right, man. How you doing?
Hey, you guys. Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's been a while since we talked. When the last time you were on the podcast, like I had mentioned, you were episode 6, and I felt at that time I was still learning a lot about podcasting and learning like where I'm at in the space
Yeah.
and kind of getting comfortable. But now I feel good. I feel like I'm in a much better space. I don't feel as intimidated talking to you as I did
Good.
before. I learned a lot though from the previous episode.
Uh-huh.
One of the things you told me to in that episode is to lean into um, being nervous, or like I felt like I was nervous in that episode. I think I mentioned that, and you're like, "Oh, that's good. You should be nervous."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually something I've been thinking about. Like I said, I was kind of going over what I'm going to talk about at this event that I'm doing, and that's such a big thing, like embracing fear, embracing pain, embracing difficulty, embracing doubts and disbeliefs. Like we often feel that those aren't supposed to be there. We're not supposed to feel this way. And the people that do things that we're trying to do don't feel this way. Where usually it's quite the opposite. In my experience, I'm a strange person that has a weird relationship with fear and stuff. And I don't know, maybe we're just kind of friends. So but the majority of the fighters I ever met, the highest of the highest level, that were just more nervous than you would ever imagine.
I could
You
imagine.
know, it's it's something you have to face. Like if you're not feeling some kind of nerves, then you're probably not doing anything significant. I mean, if you are, you got to be nervous. Yeah, you're either nervous about performance, wanting to do your best. Of course, there's nerves about, when it comes to fighting and any other physical thing, pain and death and damage and that kind of stuff. So like there's all kinds of reasons to be nervous, and there's a whole spectrum of that too, where it comes to feeling, where it comes to physicality of like shutting down completely, your legs going out. And yeah, it's really just a matter of the people that can deal with it and use it to their benefit. But as I said before, far too often I feel like we're trying to avoid it or make it like it's not supposed to be that way.
Well, I think for me, it was when you agreed to do the podcast before, I'm like, wow, Kevin Ross agreed to do my podcast. He was just previously on Joe Rogan. And it's so like when you agreed to do it, I'm like, wow, this big name figure is willing to do my podcast. And then I started freaking out. And it's like, it's almost like this imposter syndrome where I'm like, I don't know if I can perform, like, let's say, as good as like Rogan or something when he's talking to you. But then you have to quickly kind of put yourself back into your place, like, okay, I'm not a Rogan, but I can make the best of my position and where I'm at this point in time.
Yeah, for certain. And I mean, we're all just people. Like we tend to view people in the spotlight as if there's something different than we are. Like they may
Yeah.
have done more, but they're just people, and they have the same doubts and fears that we all do. I never viewed myself as any different than anyone else. And that imposter syndrome you're talking about, I've always had that. Like I don't feel any different than you or anybody else. I of course I've done more, and maybe accomplished more in a certain field, but I don't have a different perspective of myself as if I'm this person that someone else would view me as. And it's really always been that way. It's never gone away. I've just learned to kind of embrace it, whereas before it would kind of freaked me out. Like I didn't really understand it. I still don't really understand it to a degree, and it's more just like that's the way it is, and what are you gonna do with it?
Do you think you have that perspective because you were a fighter and you literally had to put everything aside whenever you walked into a cage, and it's either you let yourself be consumed by those feelings and those emotions, or you just focus on it and don't let those things consume you?
Yeah, you obviously have to deal with it on a more extreme basis than a lot of people do. You are in front of people performing, and there's the physical aspect of that kind of damage and risk. And yeah, I don't know. I think the one really great thing about fighting is it exposes you to who people really are. You can't pretend when you're in there. You can pretend a lot on the outside, and obviously a lot of people do. And, they find ways around it. But when you're in there, all that gets stripped away. There's no. You're going to see who's a coward, and you're going to see who's strong. You're going to see who's willing to go through the fire. And not necessarily always every fight, but over time. And anyone can go in there and fight and look good once in a while.
Yeah.
It really does show you who people are. And even just the training aspect of it, that's such a great thing, because we strip away all these external things that separate us, like race and money and religion and all this stuff. And we're all just people trying to do the same thing. Like we're just trying to be better at this art. And you don't even think about who this person is on the outside, because none of that matters anymore. Like it all gets stripped away as soon as you walk through the door. And that's a really great thing about martial arts, and just that mentality you have as a martial artist. I would say, obviously there's people who are just fighters, and but I've always felt like a real martial artist, and fighting is something that I expressed and did. But really, I mean, martial arts is a lifestyle.
I've interviewed a couple of fighters since we previously talked. One of them was Michael Gilmore. He's in the UFC, but he's from the Lansing area where I live. And one thing I realized by talking to him and then talking to some other people who aren't necessarily fighters is that, like, he's a lot more chill and relaxed, and just like he has like this almost this like I don't know, self-respect for himself. Like you could just see the way he carries himself. He's so much more calm than a lot of other people. Is that something you kind of experience also?
Yeah, I've always been a overly calm person, but it certainly is something that training and fighting brings out in people, because you do have to face so many of these issues that we all face in everyday life, but in a more extreme environment, in a more forced way, in a way that is like every day you have to deal with this. You have to deal with this fear, you have to deal with this pain, you have to deal with these doubts, you have to deal with this whole spectrum of things that a lot of us will inevitably have to face. But you're doing it so regularly that it just becomes normal, and you're confronted with violence and aggression. And yeah, even though it's contained and in a safer environment, you're still playing around in those fields where most people never ever do. And then once they face it, they usually just completely shut down. It's like the guy that thinks he's gonna go out there and like beat somebody up, but who's never been in a fight before. Like most people's perception of how they'll react in those situations is so out of whack. It's just completely skewed. And just being able to stay calm in a position where most people would shut down. I mean, the ability to do that gives you so much more of a perspective of what's going on around you. You're not so reactive to the situation. And I find that that's one of the bigger issues that we face is we're so reactive to things. We're so reactive to what we're shown on the television, what we hear, what we see, where a person that confronts that regularly, they can kind of take a step back, and have put things into context and perspective. And like you can see things for what they are, not for what they feel in the moment or what they seem to be.
This episode is brought to you by Red Bike Delivery. This delivery service operates only using battery-powered, eco-friendly transportation. Red Bike Delivery is there for all your delivery needs, whether it's dinner for the family, flowers for your partner, or new houseplants for your new collection. Red Bike Delivery will gladly deliver those and everything in between. So what are you waiting for? Check out Red Bike Delivery on Facebook or Instagram for more information. Red Bike Delivery, because there's only one Earth.
I find that it's a lot harder to manipulate people like that because they're not so emotionally reactive to a situation. And it doesn't even mean that that emotion that you have is wrong, but it gives you time to figure that out and know that this might just be a natural reaction to this situation. Like I might be freaking out and panicking, but do I really need to freak out and panic? Can I make this better? Can I make it worse? And by doing martial arts, or I would say really anything that's difficult, anything you pursue in life that's difficult and you're doing this daily, a lot of those things you confront and a lot of those lessons you learn. The thing is you forget that most people don't do that. So when you're used to being around people that train all the time, people that fight, that becomes normal to you. And then then once you're out in like the real world, you kind of get freaked out. Like why is everyone so panicky about this? And why is everyone so like extreme about this situation? Don't you see it for what it is, not just what they're telling you? And it's I think that's actually getting worse as we progress in quotes there, because the more we become addicted and reliant on technology, the less human element is in there. And we're slowly becoming locking ourselves into these boxes, and we're losing so much. I think one of the most important things to remember is like everything comes with a cost. Just because something's presented to you as this really great thing, this free thing, this healthy thing, whatever the case may be, you're giving up something. And with all of our progression and all of our technology, which is great, how many things are we losing in that process? And it's, if you understand what you're giving up, then that's okay. But the problem is that we don't. We're so focused, we're so fixated on the really great benefit of whatever that is. We're not paying attention to what we're giving up. And eventually you might need that thing you're giving up, that ability that you're giving up, that strength that you're giving up, even if it doesn't seem that way. Like with a lot of things, like how many people these days can even jumpstart a car or change the oil or, make their food by themselves. We're losing our self-reliance, and all under the guise of progress and safety, and that's all great. But when you aren't taking into account what you're giving up, what you're losing, eventually that's going to come smacking you in the face, and then you're in a position to where you don't have a choice anymore. Like with just look at with the supply chain and the food and everything, because none of us grow our own food anymore. None of us are self-reliant. We're so reliant on these external forces that might not have our best interest in mind, or something happens and then you're reliant on them and you're totally screwed. And that can be, what's that?
Oh, I understand that firsthand. I work at General Motors, and one of the things that we're experiencing right now is part shortages, and we have been since COVID. And part of the problem with that is that we're so reliant on like China and Taiwan and all these other countries that are overseas. Now we can't get like chips and I think that wheel liners, with like some of the most random parts that you would never think would be short, we'd be short on, we're short on. And so actually right now we're laid off, and we were supposed to go back this week to work, and they canceled it because of parts. And then who knows about next week? It's like it's this ongoing thing. And supposedly it's going to happen, from here on out for the next year, 2 years, who knows? Forever. But
because
it's because our lack of ability to build parts here in the United States. Like we've outsourced it to all these countries, and the same thing for food and agriculture and all that stuff too.
Well, we've gotten so used to outsourcing everything, not just that, but our mentality, our physicality. We're putting everything off on these external things. We're taking medication. We're like getting surgeries, and that doesn't mean those things are bad. That's the problem. we put everything into this black and white context where it's like, oh, you either think medicine is bad or you're a complete naturalist. And we're like, well, what about surgeries? What about all the advances we made? Like, well, that's why everyone gets all into these arguments all the time, and why it's so easy to put us against each other. It's like, there's a time and a place for everything. Like technology and science and all that is wonderful. But the problem is we're not starting from ourselves. Like we're not taking into account what we can do first.
Yeah.
Then as we progress, we're like, all right, this is as much as I can do as an individual. What can I do with help? What can I do with robotics, technology? And we're sold this lie that, oh, it's just easier this way. It's better this way. It's better for everybody. It's better for everything. Some cases, certainly, but not for every cases. And now it's just automatic. You're like, oh, if something's wrong with you, I'll take this pill. Well, what does that pill do? Oh, it just makes you feel better.
Well, I think that's when it kind
everything.
of breaks down to self-discipline and accountability for yourself. I mean, if you're to the point where you have to have surgery on something, let's say to lose weight, you want to have a band put in. Like, have you tried to lose weight physically? Or are you just giving in to the
and really, like, what do you mean by trying? Like, I just want to? That's trying.
Right.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's tough to convey to people, because who gets to say who's trying hard enough and who's doing enough work, and and that's where there doesn't need to be more conversations, and we need to be willing to look at ourselves and what we're doing to contribute to these problems. That problem might be there, it might be very real, but how much of that are we helping, and how much of that are we hurting? And because how many times, time and time again, you go and get the surgery and it doesn't do what you wanted it to do. You wind up right back where you were before, and we're just on this cycle of surgeries and medication and just.
Well, we want the quick fix to the problem. Yeah.
And the problem with that is every time you take the easy way out, next time a little bit easier, a little bit easier, a little bit easier, because you're not going to be motivated to go to the hard direction. Like, well, this is easier. That's why I think we all need to be very conscious of the times that we do that. There's so many, there's a multitude of moments throughout the day, throughout the week, where we just take a little bit easier, we ease back a little bit, we don't push ourselves, we don't hold ourselves to that level, particularly if we don't have someone in our lives that's kind of keeping us accountable. And that, that's another thing with fighting that goes across the board to everything in life, is it's very difficult to keep progressing and keep pushing yourself if you don't have somebody that's pushing you externally. So if you don't have somebody, like if you're the best person in the gym, it's very difficult to keep progressing like you were when you were the worst person in the gym, because you're setting the bar now, where before someone was like, this is where the bar is, and you either get here or you got to get out, and that's a big aspect of many issues in life is that factor. And of course we're programmed to look for the easy way out. When you think about back in the day, having to go hunt for your food and living by campfire and that kind of stuff, it's like, you're not going to go to the more difficult thing. You're going to, how do I stay as safe as possible? How do I stay healthy? And a lot of that is really great, but in this environment, in this world, it does the opposite.
Yeah.
And if we can start to recognize that we're naturally inclined to those things, and that's why it's so easy to manipulate people, because it's like the people doing this, and they know this, and when you think about marketing to people, like, they know our psychology, they know what we're drawn to, they know how to manipulate people, how to put fear into people, how to put desire into people. It's very easy to manipulate people because of that.
That's one thing I was just talking with my friend Cipriano. He's a runner, and he's been running all these marathons, and he started training for a triathlon and then got rhabdo. But one thing that happens all the time, like when he posts his runs on social media, and I've seen it, because when I post something and I might not be satisfied with like the distance or even my time, people will be like, well, that's more than what I'm doing, or that's more than what the average person's doing. It's like, no, like it's just not my best. Like I didn't I didn't perform my best. And so like people want to give you these like kind of excuses like, oh, you're doing more than what the average person's doing. Like I don't want to be average.
Yeah, that's tough too, because there's the we're always going to be so hard on ourselves that we don't take any credit for a lot of what you do. But then you also look at, well, if I do, it's easy to start slowly going back. Well, I'm at least I'm doing more than the guy sitting on the couch. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, okay, but what's your really goal here? So yeah, I think of course I think it's important to give yourself credit for the work that you've done, how far you've made it. But if you're trying to constantly improve, you're always going to feel like you haven't done enough, and it's hard to balance that. And I would say it's almost impossible to do that. But I think at least if you understand that mentality and what that is, you might not be so hard on yourself to where you're like beating yourself up just because of that. But you know, when you look at things that have progressed throughout humanity and those leaps that we've made, it's only from the people that refuse to settle for mediocrity, and they set their sights so high that it was impossible and it couldn't be done until it was done, and then it becomes normal, and then that becomes where the line is. And you know, there of course there is a balance in all things, just like we were talking about with technology and everything. It's like if you're constantly pushing that line, what are you giving up in the process?
Yeah.
So it's not to say just mindlessly go after things. You do have to take into account what you're giving up, what cost that comes with. And as long as you're viewing things in that spectrum, at least you know what it is that you're giving up. Because a lot of times we don't recognize what we're giving up in the process of these things until it's too late, or until we've done so much damage. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, or a good direction we're going in or a bad direction we're going in. Just because you're going towards something positive, I would say it's even more dangerous then, because you're so focused on that positive thing that you're ignoring all the damage you're leaving behind you.
Absolutely. That's one thing I've had to learn, because I can get pretty crazy about things whenever I start training for something. Like that's all I'm focused on, my diet, and just I guess I don't learn to enjoy like just certain things, like or like a family get together, like a bad meal or something. Like I let that one thing just kind of define who I am until I'm done with it.
Yeah.
And it definitely affects, like, you know, like I said, family get-togethers or gatherings, or like, you know, my family, whenever they want to go get ice cream or something, and I'm like, no, I'm not, that's not what I'm doing. So yeah, it definitely can affect, your being crazy about things can definitely affect relationships.
Yeah, it's tough. I would say that's one of the tougher aspects of progressing towards a goal. Is, of course, it's easier just to block every other aspect of your life out and just focus on this thing. But you know, it's probably not the healthiest thing, or the best thing, particularly the people around you, the people that love you. But one good lesson I learned over the years, and you know, I didn't have a family and stuff like that to have to focus on and worry about. But you know, Eddie Abasolo, he was married and he had kids and everything, and we talked about this a lot. And really what he ended up figuring out over the years is just making sure that he's present in those moments. So even if I only have 5 minutes to spend with my kids, they have 100% of my focus, my time, and my attention. What happened prior to him figuring that out is, like, when he's at the gym, he's giving himself to the gym, but now he feels bad because he's not with his family. But then when he's with his family, he's worried about not being at the gym. And so both are suffering because of that. You know, and it's not necessarily about the time, it's about the quality of that time. It's just like in training, you know, you can spend 24 hours a day in the gym and not go anywhere.
Yeah.
Whereas you can spend half an hour in the gym completely focused, dedicated, and I'm here in this moment. Everything that I'm doing, my mind, body, and my spirit are into, and you're going to get much more out of it. So learning how to delegate your time and your energy and being in those moments when you do it. It's like, if I'm going to do it, know that you're going to do it. It's like, I'm going to have a cheat meal. Okay, I'm going to have a cheat meal. Don't be like, oh, now I feel like a total piece of shit afterwards and like beating yourself up. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're going to do it, just do it.
Yeah.
and accept it. And like, this is part of it. I'm willing to do it because of this. And I know I'm going to get right back on my thing after that, or else you're beating yourself up on both ends of the spectrum. And that's double bad.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One question I had was shortly after you were on the podcast before, you announced you were retiring, and since then you've retired from fighting. What does that dynamic look like in your life as far as like the discipline of going to the gym daily and training? I assume you still train, but it's probably not to the same extreme, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think for myself, I always had a good perspective from when I started, because I did start so late. I did always view all this as extra credit, and it could be over at any moment. And that's also what motivated me to give myself so much to it and go so hard, and to constantly push myself and go into these really dangerous situations, knowing that, it could all be over tomorrow. And, I thought that not just about my career, but my life too. I always viewed everything as just being extra credit. Like, I'm not supposed to be here anyway. I'm not supposed to be alive. So yeah, but that always, of course, that fighting forced me to be healthy. So that's helpful. That you kind of have to be. I mean, you obviously don't, because a lot of people aren't. And, but again, I knew that because of my late start, I didn't want to have any excuses for anything else. Like, there's no way I'm going to take it easy over here, because I have a very finite amount of time to work with. It's like, I can go party and get fat when I retire if I really want to. You know what I mean? It's not helping out what I'm doing right now.
Well, if I remember straight from the last episode and previous interviews you've been in, you kind of experienced that life a little bit, right? Like, you were pretty heavy.
I lived that life. I lived that life fucking 24 hours a day for a really long time. And yeah, so that was always a motivator for me, is that I know what that is. I know where that goes. I know what that leads to. And everything, like, it was so difficult for me to turn everything around. Like, I'm not even going to play around in that water anymore. I'm not even going to think about it. It's not even an option for me, because none of that is helpful to what I'm doing right now and where I'm going. And yeah, now after I've retired, it's different, but it's like, obviously I'm not going to train like I was training for a fight, because that's all that I did. I couldn't do anything else. All that I did was I trained all day long, every day. Even when I wasn't in the gym, I was focused on training. I was watching fights. But now it's definitely different. I think for myself, I know that I need to stay healthy. I need to work out. I don't necessarily need to train, but if I'm not at least active to some degree on a regular basis, I saw myself going slipping right back to that. It's like, when you've had that devil on your back, you're never any farther away from it than you were when you first started. 20 years later, I'm no farther away than I was when I turned my life around. I think always being aware of that has been helpful, because, like I said, when we were talking about before, it's like, you're not aware of the things that you're giving up. You need to be aware of what you're giving up. You need to be aware that this thing is on your back and wants to destroy you as soon as you let it. Because when you don't, that's when it's going to happen. When you're like, oh, I'm safe, I don't need to worry about this anymore. It's been however long. I'm not an addict anymore, or whatever. I'm like, yeah, you're always one. You're going to be one forever. And the sooner you come to terms with that, the healthier and better you're going to be. So yeah, after I stopped, I let myself kind of hang out and just not think about anything for a little bit. But then eventually it's like, all right, well, one, I know I need to be active. So at the very least, I need to get up and get my body moving every day. You do a little bit more and be like, all right, I want to, get back to hitting the bag a little bit, start lifting a little bit. And, eventually you find how much of that and what it is you're trying to do now, and like where your baseline is. Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty consistent, especially this year, about working out almost on a daily basis, and not to the degree of really pushing myself. Like, I'm right at that point now. It's like, all right, now I want to maybe set some goals, whether they're physical goals or, you know, I don't think I'm gonna like do any competitions or anything, but if I ever like settle down somewhere, I'll be like, yeah, maybe I want to start competing in, maybe like jujitsu or wrestling or whatever, do a marathon. Like Mark Bell, this power lifter dude, he's like, oh, you should do a marathon. I'm like, dude, I fucking hate running. Like, I hate it. Like, I would never. And he's like, hey, he's like, that's why you should do it, because it's difficult and it's hard. And I'm like, oh God, I'm like, I know I'm really gonna do this. But yeah, like stuff like that. I think always having difficult goals and things that you don't want to do, like forcing yourself to get up early, forcing yourself to work out, forcing yourself to take a cold shower, forcing yourself to eat healthy. Like, it's not necessarily the funnest thing, but when it becomes a lifestyle, it is, because you understand what the other thing brings. You understand what that comfort, what that laziness contributes to, and where inevitably it will go. And the farther down you get on that road, the harder it is to go back. So it's like, I don't ever want to let a certain amount of time pass before I've worked out, because I know each time it's that much harder. Like, I used to view it when I was fighting, when in like the weight gain after a fight, like I would set a bar, like, you can't go past this, because every pound after that gets it doubles how difficult it is. It's like there was a certain point, I'm like, all right, within a week or two, I can be right back to where I was. But after that, then it becomes 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And you know how difficult it is, and you know how frustrating and impossible it seems to people that are trying to lose weight and try to do it. I'm like, I don't want to get there, because I know how impossible it was to get to where I'm at now.
Yeah.
So much of things in life is it's a process. It's consistency. It's a lifestyle. And you can't start and stop. That's what, like, when I was coming up, I didn't understand how people would go fight and then take months off and then come back. I'm like, that's why you're not progressing. That's why you're not getting any better.
You're starting at
your
zero.
Career was so short. Yeah. So for myself, it was like, yeah, I'm gonna take a day or two off, but that's it. I already felt so far behind. I always view it as like, we're on this train, and if you step off, that train keeps going, and then when you jump on, you're that much farther behind on the train, and you got.
That's a really good analogy
to where you were. So there is obviously the balance of, you can't just floor it the whole time, but learning how to take like active rest days, where back in, I think 2009 was the first time I ever took off from training or fighting. After I fought Chike for the WBC title, I took a month off. I didn't do shit for a month. I was like, I'm not gonna do nothing physical. I'm gonna take this time off. I'm gonna let my body heal. All these injuries are gonna feel great afterwards. And it was the worst decision I ever fucking made, man. My body started it's like pouring concrete on yourself.
Yeah.
Because like, we don't think about that. Our lack of movement is what contributes to our aging process, our injuries. You always got to stay fluid and moving, even when you're resting, so it's like, on those days off, you should at least be stretching. You should at least be going for a walk, because if not, you're going to be that much worse off and that much solidified when Monday comes around. Once I started doing that, incorporating, those active rest days, and learn how to fluctuate between high intensity and extremely low intensity, but never off. That really helped me a lot. I'd say those last 5 years in my career. And, as I progressed in my career and as I aged, I had to figure all that out. A lot of that is like, in the beginning, it was just like, just go as hard as you can, as much as you can. We're trying to make up time here. And that was very helpful. But as you get more intelligence, more experience, you realize about that quality time, not just amount of time.
Well, and
But in
it
the beginning, you do have to just do the work.
it only gets harder too as you get older.
Oh yeah, way harder. So yeah, it's like that's the funny thing too, is we always talk about, oh well, I'm just older now, so it's that much more difficult. Like, yeah, you should be that much more conscious about your health, your diet, your exercise. But we do the opposite. We do less as we age. We eat worse as we age. And then we're like, oh, why do I feel like shit? Like, but you can just look at it. There's 70-year-olds doing bodybuilding competitions. Like, you can't use age as an excuse. You can't really use anything as an excuse. It might be a factor, but
Not
it's
anymore.
not the whole, right? Not anymore. And it's so easy to view, kind of that natural aging process, or really anything. We view so many factors as reasons why we can't accomplish things. Our age, our gender, our fucking finances, our place in the world. And those might be contributing factors, but it's not the whole spectrum of what it takes to be successful. And
well, they're just
there's
excuses.
always ways they're just excuses. And that's what makes it difficult, because some of those factors might be very real, and it's to say, well, I can't do it because of this. Yes, that might be true. One, are there ways to make up for it in other areas? I always use the like the naturally gifted person versus the hard worker. You might not have that natural ability, but you can make up for so much of that with work ethic. And that really comes into play with really anything, again, with all that spectrum of stuff that it takes to be successful. There's usually a way to make up for what you're lacking. There's ways to get better at what you're lacking. The ways to get stronger and compensate in other aspects of your life. There's always ways around it. Almost always.
What I like to say to people, like, and that's one thing I've learned with the podcast, is that as long as you're doing something every single day towards your goal, doesn't matter what it is. You don't even have to be like, let's say it's the podcast. I don't necessarily have to be doing an interview. As long as I'm like promoting, or I'm putting something up on social media, or I'm editing, or I'm actively reaching out to people who, I want to come on the podcast, as long as I'm doing something every single day, you're always consistently moving forward. You're not staying stagnant.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Even just thinking about it, mentally thinking about it, it's like, and that's what, again, what we were talking about earlier, the quality of the time, what you're putting into this, especially when you're not actively doing that thing that you're trying to get better at. It's right. It's the people that can still find ways to benefit what it is they're doing, even if it's just staying healthy, even if it's just thinking about that, even if it's just avoiding those things that aren't contributing to it. Right. So much of that is what's beneficial, and so much of that we do have control over, yet we outsource all these things. We're like, oh well, I can't because X, Y, and Z. Not taking into account, well, what are you doing? What are you doing in spite of those things? Well, and we're very, very rarely are we do we hold ourselves accountable to all that, especially when we do have an excuse of, well, I don't have this thing, whatever it is. Right. And when you really understand what successful people have had to do to get that success, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah. You view this surface thing as, well, I didn't have that surface thing that they had. Yeah. But how many of those other things that you do have did they take and use that you aren't? Well, why didn't you? Why didn't you do that thing? Why didn't you? And another one is, sometimes we view that end goal, like, I can never get to here, that whatever that is, that greatness maybe, or that final whatever, like, I can't get to that end thing, so there's no point in even trying. Yet you could almost get there, or you could get a little bit closer to there. You could get closer than you are right now. But because you can't get to the end, you say, why even bother trying? And that's okay. But you need to understand that you have a choice with that. You made that choice. Nobody else made that choice. You decided, I can't make it to the end, so I'm not going to try at all. That's fine. But don't pretend like it's some external force working against you, when it's very rarely is that the case.
Well, that's a victim's mentality, right?
Which we all naturally have instilled in us. It's hard not to have that. You're always going to have that to a degree, but understanding that you do have that, and then there's always something you can do, even if at the very least it's just your perspective and how you view this situation. That alone is night and day different than what most people do.
Yeah.
Most people are just like, oh, this is just the way it is. I'm like, yeah, it's the way it is, but can you look at it differently? Can you view it? Can you just accept it? Like, this is the way it is, and there's nothing I can do about it, and that's okay. Not, oh, poor me, this is horrible. Like, yeah, things are horrible for everybody in different ways.
That's that kind of brings me back to our first episode. I remember when we arranged it, I was super excited. I'm like, I got Kevin Ross. This is so sweet. And then after the episode, I was so down. I'm like, man, this episode sucked. Like, not you, my performance sucked, and I was not happy. And at that moment, I'm like, okay, I do not want to let this happen again. And so since that time, when you and I last talked, I've actively worked on trying to get better each time, because it's either you let that consume who you are and you just give up, or you continue to move forward and just get better.
Yeah, and that's that. I don't want to say failing, but having difficulties and not being where you want to be is one of the greatest motivators in the world.
Oh yeah.
Be like, I'm either going to quit, or I'm going to say, all right, how can I get better at this thing? How can I make sure that thing that happened never happens again? Like when I lost my very first fight, and I was like, I'm never going to let that happen again. Or I'm at the very least going to make it to where I've strengthened myself in every area that contributed to that loss. It's like one of the biggest things was I like gassed out right away. And that's, your first fight, you just fucking go nuts and everything. And I just remember how helpless I felt, because I couldn't even move anymore. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And I was like, well, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with my ability level. That just has to do with my being able to breathe and to function. So I always put my conditioning at the forefront of everything. Like, this is always the most important thing to me, because I can't always control the level of person that's in front of me. Like, there's only so much time to get better. And if I'm fighting somebody that's been doing this for 20 years, like, there's nothing I can do about that. But I can be in the best shape ever. I can push this so hard that it's going to make people want to quit. And that's something I always, and that we always have control over. Nobody can control how hard we work.
Yeah.
And that's another aspect that I think a lot of fighters neglect and kind of give up, where they could be pushing themselves harder, but they have to do it themselves.
Well, I think it's easy to kind of look at somebody who is at the top of their game, like yourself. Somebody starting out in a fighting career. It's easy for somebody to look at you and be like, wow, Kevin Ross, so good. But they don't see like what it took for you to necessarily get to that point. They didn't see the loss. They didn't see how you struggled in your first fight. They didn't see the hours that you put in at the gym. And then, but the only way you can get as good as you are, or even know what you're fully capable of, is by just continuously doing it. And that's one thing I've learned by this podcast. That's the only way to get better, is by continuously doing it. And you'll have mistakes. You'll say stupid shit. Bad things will just happen. Recordings won't necessarily go right, and just, it's part of the game.
Yeah, it's like, if you know how to get good at one thing, you know how to get good at everything, because it's the same process for everything. Basically, it's the same process for everything.
It's time and effort.
Time, effort, and energy, and dedication. And that's really it. There's no secret. There's no secret to success.
No,
it's the same for everybody. It's the problem is that it's different for everybody. Everyone's got to deal with different things. Everyone's got different hurdles. Everyone's got different limitation, but it's the same process for everyone. Like, everyone is going to have to push themselves. Everyone has to overcome loss and failure and weakness, and everyone's going to have to pick themselves up when they get knocked down. Everyone's going to have to refuse to look at the surface and just keep pushing forward through everything that might be telling them they're going in the wrong direction. And everyone's got to take that path. It's the one unifying factor for every successful person in the history of the world. They've all had to do that. And anyone can be momentarily successful. That's different. That is when certain factors might come into play, like natural ability or anything else. But you can look at the most naturally gifted athlete on the planet, and I guarantee you he's worked harder than anybody else, because that you just, that's the way that it is, that you have to, you have to, like every, you look at like Beethoven or Jimi Hendrix or people like that, and you like go back and like learn about them. Those motherfuckers did that shit all day long. Like Jimi Hendrix used to walk around with the guitar everywhere that he went. He used to sleep with it all the way up until his death. Like he never stopped practicing, he never stopped learning, he never stopped working. You always have to work, especially if you have this great talent and ability. Like you need to use that gift that you were given. Like, it comes with a cost. If you want to succeed at anything, it's going to cost you. It costs everybody. Nobody gets it for free.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're kind of moving into the motivational realm a little bit. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, I've always tried to be a motivational person, or as I said before, it's like I kind of understood the position I was in, the way that I was viewed in this light, and I wanted to give back as much as I could. Like when I was coming up, I didn't really have anyone to look at for motivation as far as someone who was in my position that had done it before, or from my age, from my country, whatever. There's great fighters, but to see someone that's been on that same path and that same journey as you. So I was always really, that always inspired me and motivated me to be very vocal about my journey, very vocal about my hurdles and losses and failures and things that I went through, because I viewed a lot of things like most of us do. You see the success, you see the highlights, you see all this, and you don't ever see the work, you don't ever see the pain, you don't ever see the failures. And I know how much that contributes to people giving up, because they do view it as this gift, almost like this person did it because they had this certain element and I don't, so I can't make it. But the more you understand people and learn about people's journeys and stories, the more you realize that they're all just people. They were just had something in them that told them they had to do this thing, and they refused to give up, and that was it. So for myself, over the years, and the more notoriety I got and popularity I got, the more I took that as a responsibility. Like, you're in this position, you are responsible to give back as much as you can. And
what is that like? Is it difficult to manage?
It wasn't difficult to manage before, because I never really thought about it before. I was able to ignore it for a really long time, particularly before the shrinking of the world with technology and everything. I never looked at myself like that, and I never even looked at myself as, like, I didn't even understand how other people viewed me. Whenever somebody would say that, I was like, why? I don't understand. I understand why. But then again, over the years, it just became something like, well, this is just the way it is. People do look at you this way, and people do look up to you, and the strangeness of that has never dissipated. Like, it's never been any less strange than it was the first time. I mean, I remember the first time it happened. I was like, what are you talking about? First off, how'd you ever see me fight? Like, there's no YouTube. Anything. Like, I don't even understand. So yeah, it just became something I had to kind of accept, and because of that, it motivated me even more to use this platform and the spotlight that I have to really encourage people to not give up and to keep pushing through. And I've always tried to convey that through the way that I fought, through the training, through overcoming all these obstacles. Like, I want people to understand that everything that I have, you have. Everything that I struggle with, everybody struggles with. Everything. We're all relatively the same you know, you might have a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that, but when it comes down to it, everyone's relatively got the same stuff, just in different ways. You know, everyone's got something difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, and it's very easy for me to sit here and be like, oh, well, you don't have to deal with this. And yeah, that's true. That's just one thing. Okay.
I mean, you're at
I don't
the
have to
height
deal
of-
with what I don't have to deal with what you have to deal with. And that goes across the board. So
I mean, you're one of these,
understanding that we all
you're
have
one of-
difficulties.
you're one of the most top fighters probably in the world, and you deal with sobriety issues, right, on a day-to-day basis. I mean,
Every day.
that's the most common thing to have to deal with for most people is substance
Yeah,
abuse.
especially now.
Yeah.
Pretty bad. Yeah. So yeah, and that too, you know, all those things that I dealt with to start with, you know, things I had to overcome. Just because you overcome something doesn't mean you're done overcoming it. It's an unending battle that we're in. I mean, that's life. You don't get past something. You just learn to deal with it. It's like when you lose somebody, when somebody dies, it never goes away. You don't ever get past it. There's no getting past it. That because you can't change that. It's that's the way it is
Yeah.
forever. You learn how to deal with it. It just becomes part of you, and you understand, like everything else in life, you have a choice to make. You're not a victim. You can either get better from this or get worse. You can either let this destroy you, or you can use it as motivation to be the best that you can be. And that's everything that happens in life. Is we always have a choice to make. And you know, that was a huge wake up call for me when I did turn my life around. Is like, you have a choice to make. You're using all these excuses about why you can't do this and blah blah blah. Like, really all it is you're afraid. You have fear. You're like, I'm not going to make it, so I shouldn't try. Or if I do it, I'm going to be viewed like this, or it's going to be too difficult, or whatever it is. But you don't ever actually know until you do it. And you're just sitting here destroying yourself, drinking yourself to death. All your friends are dying. You're losing all these people. And what is it really doing for you? You have a choice to make. It's your responsibility. And if you want to make the decision to destroy your life, then take some ownership over it, because that's what you're doing it anyway. And yeah, just like smacked me in the face that I do have a choice. We all have a choice, you know. And again, even if it's just my perception of the situation, I have a choice in what that is. And once I started understanding that and taking responsibility in the choices that I do have, it turned everything around. It turned my entire life around. And what I always like to tell people is it doesn't make anything any easier. It just simplifies it. You understand it more. And once you understand it more, in some ways that does make it easier, because it's simple. It's like, I'm going left or right. And that's it. There's no in between. It's either left or it's right. And I know what left is. I need to go right. And that's it. It doesn't matter how difficult it is. It doesn't matter how many setbacks I have. It doesn't matter how many failures I have. It doesn't matter how many injuries I have. It doesn't matter how old I am. It doesn't matter how little money I have. I'm going this way. And that's it.
Yeah, I think that was weird. There's a weird noise in the background. I think that's important. What's that?
I said it might have been Bovie.
Is that the dog?
Sounds like a gremlin. Yeah. Yeah.
So now you're doing these motivational speeches. How many speeches are you doing? Is it just this one coming up in September?
I've never done any. This is my
never-
first one. So I mean, I would say, I mean, this is my first one that's like, this is what it is, and this is what you're doing, this is what you're talking. Like, this is what this is for.
How did that come about? Did somebody reach out to you?
Yeah, so it was actually the first sponsor I ever had. His name is Brent. The first shirt I ever had was the cancer fighter. He actually lost his mother to cancer, and he started this organization. And all of our proceeds went to benefit cancer research and stuff like that. So he was the first person that ever sponsored me. I helped him train. He actually had a fight back then, and you know, we've been friends ever since then. And this has been something he's been wanting to do for a long time. He actually tried to do it like a year ago, but you know, it was his first time trying it, and it all fell apart. And you know, like everything else, he just kind of learn through failure. You progress through failure. And so he finally got everything together this year. And so he's putting on this 3-day event. It's like a self-development seminar kind of deal. They got a bunch of really great speakers, authors, military people. And yeah, he reached out to me to see if I would want to do a segment and speak at it. So this is my first time doing something to that degree. I've done a lot of, obviously, interviews and seminars, but Muay Thai seminars where I do talk a lot and that kind of thing. But this is very specified to this realm, So this is my first time, and it's the same kind of just like starting fighting. It's like I've never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing.
Do you think it's something that you will continuously do? I mean, obviously you haven't done it yet and you're still preparing, but do you think this is something you can see yourself doing?
Certainly. Something I have always wanted to do, and done in many other ways, just not to this degree. And I've always
not publicly.
Yeah, not publicly. And I've always really been inspired by people that do that. I think it's really great. I think there is like the motivation. Like, I don't want to be a motivational speaker. Like,
No.
But that in that realm, I think we all have very unique stories and things that are that everyone can benefit from, because again, we are all in the same journey and we're all dealing with all of these same things, even if it's different. Like, people that I'm talking to, like, they're probably not trying to get in the ring or anything like that, but they're probably trying to do something that's scary, something they doubt, something they view as maybe impossible because of whatever factors they might have in their life. And I always enjoy hearing people's stories, because it is something that we can all take from. It's something that goes across the board to every aspect of life. It's those unifying factors that we all have. So again, I have lived a very unique life in a lot of ways, and I've dealt with a lot of things that we all face. And because of that, I think that I can help contribute to a lot of people, and I would like to do that. And this is an opportunity to do that. And I know it's going to be just like anything else. You got to fail your way through, and you're making mistakes, and just going to come out like, oh, I'm the greatest speaker in the world now because I tried it once. So
right.
Yeah, it's
have you ever thought about doing a podcast?
Yeah, but I also understand that it's something you can't just like dip your toes in once in a while.
No.
What I mean? And because of just my lifestyle right now, I'm like all over the place all the time, it'd be really tough for me to be consistent at. Obviously, I could, you got to make sacrifices. Like, you want to be consistent in something, all right, well, you got to do this every week at this time, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. And yeah, I think eventually I probably will. But it's similar to it's like opening a gym or something. Like, I'm not ready to put everything I have into that thing because there's too many other things right now. But
I think that's respectable, because I mean, a lot of people will want to do like a podcast, but then they don't realize the amount of effort and time it takes. So then they just end up giving up. And so to realize that it takes a lot of time, and to realize that in order to get good at it, which I'm sure you're naturally good at talking anyways. So that's why I said I think you should start a podcast. But I think
it's ironic. It's ironic because I'm naturally probably the most quietest person on the face of the earth. Like, I don't like, it's easy for me to talk to people that are talking, and like once we're going, like, I can do that. Like, to organically bring out these conversations, and to be like a podcaster, like, you need to be the one that's pushing this boat. It's easy to be interviewed. Like, I could talk forever.
Yeah.
When it's like this, but like if we were sitting here just hanging out, I probably wouldn't say a word to you.
Like, why doesn't Kevin like me?
But it's like I try to view those things that maybe you're not naturally inclined to do or that are difficult, is like, you should probably do this because of that, because even just going after this is going to help contribute to who you are as a person in some way. So right now it's one of those things like, I'll do them once in a while and interview some people, and like, I think eventually I'll be like, all right, I want to do a little bit more, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's like this goal that I want to do.
Right. That reminds me of I think it was David Goggins that said it. I think he said, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's something I try to live by daily.
That's the greatest life lesson there is, especially if you want to do anything.
Yeah.
Other than just sitting where you are and accepting the way that life is. If you want to do anything, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be extremely uncomfortable in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
There's no doing anything without discomfort.
Yeah.
And even more so in this world where we're trying to avoid discomfort as much as possible. Like, you should be sprinting at discomfort.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's like the other day when you, I think it was Monday when we texted and you had posted that video from our previous episode. I had just went on a 6-mile run. Well, I haven't been running. And I had decided that since I hadn't been running, I'm going to punish myself and run 6 miles, because I knew that 6 miles would be difficult. And I knew I could do it, but I knew it'd be very difficult, especially in the heat. And I did. And actually, I was using you as motivation, because I remember Gina talking about you running 6 miles every day on Rogan's podcast.
Yeah.
And so I was like, Kevin's doing it, I'm doing it.
Well, I'm glad I could help you out.
Yeah, and then shortly after I got back and I was lifting, and then you texted me. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I gotta like I said, I'm probably gonna I need to start running here, and I'm trying to avoid it as much as possible.
That's awesome. Well, man, is there anything else you want to talk about or mention on the podcast before we wrap it up?
No. As I said, I'm doing that event. It's in Chicago. It's called Roger Up. The website's rogerupevent.com. It's the September 1st through 3rd. So it's a 3-day course. They're gonna have a bunch of speakers. They're also doing some jiu-jitsu stuff, like a couple of so it's like a full experience. You get the speakers, you get the I think they're doing some like dinners as well. So every night, like, a couple people all go to the dinners and stuff. So it's a pretty cool thing in Chicago. All the info is on the website. So yeah, if anybody's going to that, I look forward to seeing you there. I'm trying to get back into writing my damn autobiography. So June, my retirement fight was in June. So leading up to that, I just completely stopped writing. It's completely stopped anything that was taking my time and attention away from fighting. So it's like, I know this is my last one, so I'm not even gonna like do anything other than prepare for this fight. And then I also needed to kind of step back anyway, because I've been doing it for so long. I'm just like stuck in this forest of everything, and I can't really see what's going on. That now I'm in this position where I'm trying to like get back into it again, and I just haven't been able to. I stepped away for so long.
What is that process like? Because that's one thing I've always wanted to do, is write an autobiography as also. So when you sit down and write, what's your process like?
Well, it kind of depends. When it comes to that, just trying to remember I have a terrible memory of my life for whatever reason. I'm sure a lot of the trauma and stuff didn't help, but it's very difficult for me to remember my life. Like, I hear people talking about their lives, or I read other people's biographies, and they'll have conversations they had with people like 20 years ago. I'm like, all right, either this is total bullshit, or I just have a terrible memory, because I can't remember a conversation with somebody like a week ago. So it was really tough for me to really put all this back together. I went back and had a lot of conversations with people from my childhood and stuff, and tried to remember a lot of stories. And like, when I go back and look through old photo albums and stuff, I'm like, oh, okay. And then so what I started doing was, just when things would pop up, I'd write down what I can remember, and just kind of got everything out on paper. And then Slowly started to put it into a time frame and timeline. I would say the hardest part is kind of how you want to tell the story. You know, when and in what way? Because, you know, like I said, some people put it in a way where it's like they're having conversations, like, all right, then I did this and then like that. When I first started writing, everything was just very factual. You know, like when I was traveling for fights and stuff, I would just write out my days a lot, like this happened, this happened, this happened. And then when I would write about them and put them online, I kind of put them online that way, you know, like this, just very, very factual, no real emotion or thoughts or anything like that, which is kind of just the way I am. But then, you know, like Gina, I think she's one of the most amazing writers I've ever written. I'm like, how do you write this shit? It's like, it has all this emotion and all this, it's all this color and flavor to it, you know, where I feel like mine is very just like bland and like factual. So, you know, just through the process of writing, I've tried to learn how to develop, and like I can write about stuff, but when it comes to myself, it's tough, you know, and that's kind of what's taking so long. Is there's that whole aspect of everything, you know, how you want to tell it, remembering things that happened, what you want to leave in, what you want to take out. So I'd like to give you an answer, but I don't know, because I'm still doing it.
Well, I mean, that's a good answer, I think, because I mean, you could literally go so many different ways with it. You could have a victim's mentality when you're telling it, like this is what happened to me, and or you can have a hero story, and I think that's what your story is. But
yeah, well, the other thing too is I think with a lot of stuff is nobody can tell you how it's supposed to be. Like there's no blueprint necessarily for this. Like tell it however you want to. Like at first I was like, all right, I need to like spell everything right and the grammar needs to be. I'm like, well, why does that have to be that way? Like as long as you understand what I'm talking about, then everything can be just, it could be one long run-on sentence for the whole book if I wanted it to be that way. I'm like, some aspects of that I really like. You know, I read, as I said, I like to read a lot of biographies, and you know, a lot of them you can tell like they didn't write this shit, like the ghostwriter. But there's a few you can really, like, you can hear that person speaking. Like I read Mickey Ward's book, and that was one of those ones I'm like, I can like hear him telling the story, and I'm sure, you know, he had somebody helping him out and do all that kind of thing, but it feels very genuine. You know, you can hear it, hear it in his voice, where there's a lot of other ones where you're like, all right, well, you told your story to this person, and then they wrote it what they thought it was.
yeah.
So I always wanted to make sure that it was something coming from me, not somebody else telling my story. So it's certain aspects of that, I'm like, this doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be even structured in any way. It can be structured however the hell I want to do it.
Yeah.
So I think that at this stage right now, it's like, I'm really just trying to find like, what voice do I want to tell this and how do I want to put it? I do want it to be good and like enjoyable to read, not just here's a bunch of shit. Here's my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's why I did need to take that step back, and now just like going back in it's hard. I just got to force myself to, like anything else, you just got to force yourself to do it. And you figure it out in the process. Like you want to do anything in life, just start doing it. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah, that's what I tell everybody. Just do it. Have you ever listened to, I mentioned David Goggins earlier, but David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me?
Yeah. So I read it, and then I listened to the audio book.
What did you think of it?
I loved the audio book. Because did you listen to the audio book?
I every time I get into running, I listen to it.
Okay. So what I really, really loved about that was he has somebody else speaking the story, but then after every chapter or so, they start talking about it. And I think that's like the coolest part about that is hearing his mindset and hearing the conversations and hearing somebody else ask about it, you know. And that's, as I said, that if I have somebody else asking me about stuff, I could talk all day about this, you know.
Yeah.
But when it's just me generating this stuff out, I'm like, I don't know what you want to hear. You know what I mean? Like I can talk about anything, but what do you want to know about? Like, what do you want to hear about? Like, all right, tell me about this story. I can tell you about this story, but then just to be the one doing it, you know, it makes it a little bit tougher. It's tougher for me because I don't naturally just like
open up like
open up and be like, yeah, here's all this stuff, you know. some people are the opposite, they're just constantly like expressing words and emotion. Like, I don't care about any of this shit. Like, why are you talking about it? Like, oh, I thought you'd want to hear. I'm like, I don't. If I did, I would ask you.
That's how it was when I did, well, my second episode, I shared my story, my personal story, and why I started this podcast. And that was probably one of the hardest things I ever did, because it was just me sitting on my couch with a microphone and just going through essentially my life story.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to do. It's not easy. Everybody thinks it's easy, but it's not, because there was nobody interviewing me. It was just me talking. And it's very strange.
Especially if you're not inclined to talk about yourself.
No, I'm not.
Like, some people love to talk about themselves.
Yeah, no, I hate it.
I don't. I don't at all. Like, if you want to know something about me, I'm an open book if you want to ask me. But if you don't want to ask me, my book's shut. Like, I'm not gonna tell you shit about me.
That's
I'll
hilarious.
tell you my name, and that's probably about it.
That's funny. Well, I will have your event that you're speaking at in the show notes. So the link to that will be there. I'm thinking about going. That's my birthday weekend. I'm thinking about going to that. Yeah,
that'd be cool, man. It'd be cool to meet you.
Yeah, would you be open to getting dinner or something?
Yeah. So I think, like I said, it's the 1st through the 3rd. I'll probably go. I don't know if I'm gonna go for the whole thing, but I'll either be there the 1st or the 2nd, and then first. I'll be there a couple days either way.
Okay.
Yeah, we can definitely link up.
All right, cool. Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right, man. Well, is there anything else?
Not that I know of.
I think this was better than the first time.
Definitely. You didn't seem as nervous.
No, I feel good. I feel fine. At first, I think
much more natural, not so forced. Not that the first, just in comparison.
No, the first one was
more organic.
The first one was definitely forced. I had this different idea of what I thought a podcast should be, especially after seeing you on Rogan and on some other podcasts I had seen online. But yeah, no, this was fun. And
you just obviously you just have to find your voice. Like, go back and watch his first fucking ones. Like,
I have
just him sitting in his fucking room,
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's one thing I've had to learn. Like, I'm a huge fan of Rogan. I listen to him all the time when I'm at work. And so also with thinking about how I want to make my podcast better, I'm like, how did Rogan do it? And where was he at when he started eventually changing and evolving? And so I've gone and I've watched his first episode, and then I've watched like his 500th episode. And I'm like, okay, well, at his 500th episode, he was still like in some bullshit studio or his bedroom or whatever it was. And he was recording. He wasn't where he is today. Yeah. So it's obviously a process.
Everything is, man. We like to think it's not, but it just is. So accept it and go through the fucking process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thanks for doing this. This was a lot of fun, and it was a pleasure talking with you again.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'll talk to you soon, and hopefully I'll see you in Chicago.
All right, sounds great.
All right, later, man.
All right, peace.